Good evening, everyone. This is the regularly scheduled June 10th City of Port Orchard Council meeting, and I was kind of hoping that we had at least one or two more council people come in, but not seeing any, so would you rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. And we'll move on to citizens' comments, and we have three on the sign-up sheet. Ms. Whittleton is the first one, so please come up and address the council.
There we go. Good evening. At the last public properties meeting, my detour request was discussed, and it was suggested it may come up during discussion tonight. I want to be sure to communicate clearly what I am asking. I am asking for the Bay Street detour, which typically routes up through Tracy on the 4th of July, to be routed up through Retzel Road or Olney in an effort to decrease traffic and improve safety concerns which were first brought to the council's attention last July and subsequently since then. As you may recall, our neighborhood typically becomes a fireworks viewing area. It also becomes a heavy traffic thoroughfare. This is due to Bay Street being closed along the waterfront and traffic trying to bridge this gap by being detoured through Tracy, which is substandard in width at several locations. It is a high volume of traffic mixed in with spectators aligning themselves along and in the street to view the display and to light off fireworks, particularly at Stockton. The problem is the traffic is not conducive to a viewing area, and the road cannot accommodate two-way heavy traffic at the north end, where it reduces down to 12 foot 6 inches wide at the narrowest spot and averages 13 feet 6 inches going up the hill. On a normal day, the neighborhood takes turns at this point, going up and down the hill. The replacement alternative routes are suggested because Olney and Retzel roads are typically not fireworks viewing areas, and they each extend the full width of a normal street. On the 4th, we have lots of disturbance, and the traffic often has to weave its way through. As I mentioned before, we have seen pedestrian vehicle near misses. I know this will not impact the fireworks activities in our area, but it could improve safety and lessen the risks involved by reducing the mix of celebratory pedestrians and traffic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Ms. Squires.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm coming to you as a licensed family home child care provider here in Kitsap County to ask and request that the City Council step forward and be proactive in our state at a 1,000-foot protection buffer for the licensed family home child cares. Initially, we were included in this with the Liquor Control Board. Subsequently, we were removed after many questions had been asked of the Liquor Control Board by the applicants. There is a definition that the Liquor Control Board uses in their way of explaining licensed child cares. I'll give you a quick synopsis of my child care. Since 1993, I am licensed through the state. First, it was with DSHS until we created Department of Early Learning. With that, my hours of business, Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., I service children birth through age 11. I have learning processes and early learning programs. Here's the state's definition with the Liquor Control Board. Child care center means an entity that regularly provides child care and early learning services for a group of children for periods less than 24 hours, licensed by the Washington State Department of Early Learning. This is the state's definition for all child care services. Sadly, with the term that the legislature used of center, that is the qualm that's being used by the applicants to remove this 1,000-foot buffer. I'm really asking our city to be proactive. I have an email here, an email conversation with the Liquor Control Board, I have a copy for each one of you. The Liquor Control Board has said that our city and county municipalities do have a right to strengthen and make their own rules. So I'm asking, as there is a development 933 feet away from my childcare that is in the city limits, and my neighborhood is a part of a neighborhood that will be eventually annexed into the city of Port Orchard. So here it says, you guys do have the right to make your own rules on the licenses. The state liquor control board cannot change that, but our cities and our counties can make this. Make this equal protection under the law, please, by adding the family home licensed childcare and school-age licensed childcare programs in this 1,000-foot buffer. Thank you for listening to me, and I hope that things can go well. If you'd like a copy of this communication where Liquor Control Board gives it, I'll be happy.
Yes, please give that to the clerk, and then the clerk will pass them out to us. Okay.
Ms.
thank
Squires,
you.
could you repeat
Yes.
your name and address?
Yes, my name's Terry Squires, Terri Squires, and my address is 1586 Southwest Cook Road, Port Orchard, Washington.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Mr. Patterson.
My name is Wayne Patterson. I live at 1962 Advantage Avenue, Port Orchard. I'm here on an issue that spirals into a lot of other issues, but I'm just going to address the point that I need to make now that has to do with geohazard areas. Port Orchard is one of the adopters of the geohazard standard under the WAC, which identifies geohazard areas, which my house, my neighborhood, was built on one. I came here tonight because I had one of many incidents happen, and the city chose not to take any action on it. The one that I'm referring to is there's a cleft, protected areas behind my house, and it's also designated as geohazard areas. I found that out because I was served with a notice of correction, which, by the way, if I had done, it would have caused an erosion to the hillside behind my house. But the city chose not to listen to that when I went forward. My next door neighbor decided to cut down all the trees behind her house, in between the base and the cleft of the hill that's an erosion zone. It's really kind of messed up because I had talked to the city about that before, and the city chose to do nothing again. A section of the hill behind her house is dropped, which is really messed up, because if we have significant rain, then my house stands a chance of being damaged. I asked the city to help me find out mitigation, to find mitigation for it. I even told them that I would be willing to help pay for it. Nothing. I was told to drop it. This is ridiculous, especially since the city, in January of this year, signed off on this resolution because the city receives hazardous mitigation grant money. My house is one of the places they're talking about in here. We can't mitigate it, there's a problem. The county also buys off on it and has it. I'll leave these for you. And the state has a mapping plan of it. In Title 18, it strictly forbids the actions that took place behind my house to happen. So I wrote a letter. I said, so if it rains, my house cracks, damages, or falls down the hill, who takes responsibility for this? No answer. The answer I got from the mayor when I talked to him was, it's my perspective. I'll let you decide. It's in black and white. Officials from the state, the county, and other avenues on here have looked at it. There are pictures of it. And they all come to the same conclusion. The city should have enforced this. I'm asking you, enforce this. Tell me what I need to do to mitigate it. Help me to mitigate it. and let's get it fixed. If my house falls down the hill, I'm not sure of what action I would take at that point, but I would definitely let somebody know that I came to the city, not on one occasion. I've got 43 emails. Well, emails and texts to city officials, 43 concerning this. If the city can take enough time to give me a notice of correction for something I didn't do, even when they take a picture of it, then they can surely take 10 minutes to figure out something that might be hazardous to me, my neighbors, and the city as a whole. That's what I'm asking. Do something. I'm asking the council to make the city officials do something. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that's the extent of the signups. Does anybody else wish to speak to the council? If you do, just raise your hand. Even if you're not signed up, that's perfectly all right. You just come up and be recognized. Okay.
Good evening. My name is Tracy Flood, and I live in Port Orchard. And I won't say my address unless you need me
No,
to.
you don't have to even say your name. We checked that out a while back. Whatever you're comfortable with is all you have to do.
So I am just going to take a moment to introduce myself. As I said, my name is Tracy Flood, and I am a Kitsap County District Court candidate for position number 1. And I believe that it's important for all of our county council members, our mayors that are throughout the county, have an opportunity to be introduced to the 2 judicial candidates that we have. So I'm taking the time out this evening to come here and to be involved with this meeting, to introduce you to myself and to let you know that I have worked the last 7 years as a judge pro tem here in Kitsap County as well as in King County. And I bring to basically the county a level of experience that no other candidate has, which is the judicial experience in 3 different areas. Pretty much, I was able to fill in when my office was right across the street in the old city of hotel. I had had my office there for a number of years, and whenever Judge Decker was unavailable, I would come across the street and fill in quickly on hearings that were in custody, just first-time hearings. So I have a 25-year history of residing inside of Kitsap County, as well as working in Kitsap County, volunteering, raising my daughter as a single mom. And I just wanted you to know a little bit about me, because as judicial candidates, you don't get to know us outside of us introducing ourselves to you. And once we do get sworn in, there's a lot of isolation that takes place. And the position that I'm going for is one in which it's the people's court. It's where you have your first contacts. And I think it's important for you to get to know me as a person. But I'm a veteran, and I thank you for your time, because I know you have to get on with business, and hopefully I kept that to under 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay. Well, we're at item number 3, approval of the agenda. Is there,
Mr. Mayor,
yes,
I move to approve the agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to make an addition to the agenda.
okay.
I would like to add under business item 7, it would be 7E, and I would like a brief discussion on the Cascade Natural Gas Agreement.
All right, we have a motion, and we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, now we have a motion and a second to add agenda item 7E. And any discussion? All those in favor of providing that agenda item, say aye.
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 Opposed, nay?
I also would like to make a motion to excuse Councilman Clausen and Councilman Patonsu.
Okay.
Second.
We should do,
Add to
Mr.
consent.
Jacoby, we should do those one at a time, or can we do them together?
A single one, if no one objects on the council. You can do it
anyone
as a
object?
single motion.
Single? Then I'll move to excuse John Clausen.
Oh, he said you could do both.
You
We could do both,
You're
yeah.
gonna-
As
oh,
as
you're
long
gonna
as
say
no one
okay.
objected, I didn't see
Okay.
anybody object.
All
so.
right. Back to the original.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to exclude the two
Excuse John and Rob.
named, the two named council people. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay? Thank you. All right, we're back to the approved, or the agenda, and we have an amended agenda at this point, and by the way, we did include some information here, and would somebody make a motion to change the agenda to add item D?
I don't think we have to.
Do we have to do that now that, because we published it late, or?
It's already part of your agenda, so
Okay,
it would
so-
only be if you were adding it right now.
Right now, okay,
Yeah.
very good, all right, so, is there any other comments, any other additions? All right, seeing no more, then we're going to be voting on approval of the amended agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That motion carries. Okay, we're on to consent agenda items.
I will move to approve the consent agenda.
Ms. Ashby, approved?
Second?
And we have a second. Is there any other discussion? Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda as published, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That motion carries. Thank you. All right, tonight we don't have any presentations or public hearings, so we'll move right on to business item 7A, and that's discussion centers of local importance regarding comprehensive plan amendment. Mr. Bond, could you lead us into that, please?
Thank you. We added this as a discussion item on the agenda because the deadline for filing comprehensive plan amendments for 2014 is this coming Sunday. I think we extend it till Monday at 5 p.m. But anyway, this was our only opportunity to talk about this prior to that deadline. And I know that one of the council members, Councilmember Ashby, is interested in filing an amendment to start a discussion on dedicating centers in our comprehensive plan. This was also discussed at length with the presentation from the University of Washington students, and it was part of their recommendation as our approach to planning the city moving forward was to identify areas where we want to focus growth, focus investment in infrastructure, and try to make the city more efficient in its ability to provide services. Finally, the countywide planning policies, which I distributed element C of the countywide planning policies as well as appendix F. Element C include policies and criteria for designating local centers, and local centers are different from the regional centers that are designated through Puget Sound Regional Council, and these are just areas that we deem important but don't rise to the level of being a Frederickson or a Port of Tacoma. And if you look at the current list, which is from 2004, you'll see that Port Orchard at that time had 3 centers designated in the countywide planning policies, and those 3 aren't even identified in our own comprehensive plan as centers. And so the county, through the KRCC and the planning directors group, is looking at this issue, and we're looking at updating this list in the coming months. And so we felt that the best, I felt that the best approach was to formally adopt our centers in the comprehensive plan and to identify which ones we want to declare as our official centers, so that then when the new criteria and the new list is made, we have that sort of all tidied up in our existing plan. And I think that's consistent with what the students had recommended. The big benefit of doing this is that during certain rounds of grant funding, especially for transportation, you can get extra points on your grant application if your project is located in a designated center. And typically, from my experience in Pierce County, they gave more points to projects that were in regional centers and just a single point to projects in local centers, but it's still better than not having a project in the center, because it may put you above the line where they cut off funding for any given round of grants. And so I've got a map, and I'm going to, actually, Brandy, could you pass those out? I actually just printed this on my way up here, and I realized that it got a little bit off center for some reason, but this is the map that I worked with the Economic Development Committee and Beck Ashby that she's going to use in her amendment application. And you'll see that there are 10 centers that are color-coded. My legend got cut off on the side, but they connect all of our main arterials. So there's a loop running down Bethel, along Lund, where it turns into Sedgwick. It goes over to the industrial park. Mile Hill has an upper and a lower center, downtown, the county campus, and then the Sydney-Sedgwick area, as well as a McCormick Woods area where the park and the future high school site are located, are all identified as possible centers. And again, I apologize that the map got cropped off, but that's something that I think would be a good thing for the Planning Commission to look at, and they may want to tweak the boundaries some or reduce the scope of it, or maybe exclude some of these. But it's a good discussion to have given what's happening at the KRCC, and I wanted to make sure that council was aware of it, and if they had any questions, just wanted to facilitate some discussion, because in late June or early July, you're going to be asked to adopt the agenda for the comp plan amendment cycle for 2014, and this is going to be one of the amendments that's on there, and I didn't want you to be looking at it for the first time at that meeting.
Council, what's your pleasure? Do you have any questions?
What I would just say is we discussed it at length yesterday at the Economic Development Committee, and at that particular meeting, we extended some of these boundaries so that we had, so that most of our centers touch each other, so that there wasn't a gap, such as coming up Bethel, there's a North Bethel and a South Bethel. And one of the reasons, or the primary reason that we divided it into smaller sections like that is we were viewing these as thinking them in terms of individual neighborhoods, and it would be easier to plan and perhaps get a developer or a champion for a smaller area rather than a larger area. So we actually have put some thought into it. What we were hoping to do is introduce the council to it, make them comfortable and familiar with it, so that when the council is presented with the proposed amendments to putting them forth to the Planning Commission, that you're already familiar with it, that it's not something that you're just starting to look at that point. And then, as Nick indicated, the Planning Commission will hold public meetings and vet this thoroughly, and then it will come back to the council, and I believe have an opportunity for another public meeting. Is that correct, Nick? Yeah.
Before council takes final action to amend the comp plan.
So I don't want council to think this is a done deal. This is just an introduction and a starting point.
Mr. Chang.
Nick, can you walk us through Appendix F and the 3 that are designated in the county and correlate them with one of the maps? Because and the map I'm thinking of is the one that says Vision Port Orchard Hypothetical Center Designation Scenario.
Yeah, and that was actually the poster, or maybe it was from the PowerPoint presentation that the students gave, and it showed just possible locations for centers that made sense in terms of what the students were looking at. But there's 3 centers on Appendix F. There's the City of Port Orchard City Center, which is downtown. There is the Tremont Community Services Center, which is essentially the hospital, and there is an overlay district in our comp plan currently for that area. But this proposal would actually expand that boundary so that it goes all the way south to Highway 16 to include the school, and then it would go east along Tremont, including Vanzee Park, to tie into the next center that is proposed to the east. And then the final proposal was the final existing center was South Kitsap Mall, which is the purple area that's shown on the new map that I passed out, and that was designated a center in 2004. And if you look at the criteria for what a center is supposed to be and what is there then and what is still there today, it's a stretch without seeing some sort of residential or cultural component to it. So I think, some of these centers are geared more towards redevelopment, others are new development, and some of them are already centers by virtue of the distribution of uses, and they can be strengthened. But I think that would be a future planning exercise once we've identified what centers we want to, spatially see around the city, and then we can work on more focused sub-area plans for each of them.
Questions?
No, if I might, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to add
Cartwright.
to what Beck and Nick had said. We did have a very lengthy discussion, and I think the consensus, at least of this subcommittee, was this approach to abut the centers was a really good approach where it would make most sense, especially when you had longer corridors that can potentially be divided into sections for grant for constructions, that you could more easily chop that into pieces and still have the ability to work on this section and come back later and work on the next section. Mile Hill's a prime example, or North and South Bethel would be another one. So I'm in support of at least this philosophy at this point, and we'll see what the Planning Commission comes up with.
Okay. Mr. Bond, I had a question. The transportation hub and ferry, right, that's the ferry, foot ferry, right? And then downtown, it seems to me like they're so close that they ought to be just one. But is this the same reason for that Mr. Cartwright just mentioned? It gives us another option to have some transportation projects in both?
Well, the boundary that's downtown is actually the overlay district, so the center boundary exactly matches the overlay, which is the east, west, and central.
Oh, okay. All
and
right.
so that's why it's shown as divided up, but that's actually all one center.
Okay. All right.
They're
I
stacked
gotcha.
on top of each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
The
I
other
understand.
thing, just for a visual for the council members, if you think in terms of Gig Harbor, there's Gig Harbor North, and they have some large box stores there. There's a Target, a Home Depot, a Costco. So that's one center for Gig Harbor. And then you have the historic downtown Marina waterfront Gig Harbor, and that's a center. And then there's uptown Gig Harbor, where their new construction and their smaller shops are. So the centers each will have their own unique personality and identity, and probably design guidelines. So that was why we chose smaller centers and are starting the process with what this map looks like.
I did
Mr.
the little
Corelli.
worksheet that was included, and it's pretty much the same as what you've come up with.
Yeah.
So I do like the idea of them abutting one another, if that's really going to help with the cause of getting more transportation dollars.
Okay, any other discussion? Seeing no more discussion on item 7A, we'll move on to item 7B. Okay, approval of May 20, 2014 Council Work Study Session Meeting Minutes. What's your pleasure?
I move approval of the May 20th minutes. I'm sorry,
right.
did you do that?
I'll second it.
Okay.
We have a motion and a second. Thank you, gentlemen. We have a motion and a second to approve the May 20th Work Study Session Minutes. Any discussion? Any changes? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Thank you, that motion carries. All right, we'll move on to item C, adoption of ordinance 00814. Clerk Reinerson, could you tell us about that, please?
No,
7C is the minutes.
it's minutes.
4 minutes.
From the May 27th.
4 minutes, yeah.
8 more minutes.
Oh, okay, sorry. I mixed those two up. Approval of May 27th, 2014 council meeting minutes. Motion?
I
Mr.
move to
Cartwright?
approve the May 27, 2014 council sitting meetings.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? No other discussion then. All those in favor of approving the May 27, 2014 council meeting minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That motion carries. Okay, now, let's see here. Oh, okay, now we're at D, discussion recreational marijuana land use regulations. Mr. Bond and Mr. Jacoby. I don't know which one would like to lead us into this.
Yeah, I can start. This issue was added to the agenda in response to what has come up recently and what was commented on earlier tonight about marijuana businesses being in close proximity to home-based daycares. And we actually were contacted by a news outlet yesterday, right before we closed, and they had questions about this, and we talked to the Port Orchard Independent last week, and that was the first I had heard of it. So we've had very limited time to research this, but in that time we've managed to develop a draft ordinance, and also I've provided a map that I put together tonight, and I identified the daycare site in purple on the map that was provided, and I produced a 1,000-foot buffer on that, and so it does go into the industrial area. I managed to highlight 3 out of the 4 marijuana processors that are proposed, and I could not find the address for the other one because I think it's the vacant property that's right on the border of the buffer. That's kind of a 4 parcels of dirt that are sort of a bare piece of ground in the middle there, and so. I don't know if you want to point to that, Greg. Turn it 90 degrees clockwise. There you go.
Sure, yeah, sure.
So it appears that there is a discrepancy between what our understanding of the rule concerning daycare buffers and what now the state is saying at the Liquor Control Board about whether or not marijuana uses are prohibited based on whether something is in a central daycare facility or is a home-based facility. And so, Greg, I don't know if you want to talk about the ordinance you drafted today.
Well, and let me give a little more background. So when the City Council adopted interim and then permanent regulations regarding recreational marijuana, we talked about whether to track the Liquor Control Board regulations, whether to ban it altogether, whether to be more restrictive. We consulted with your insurer and the attorney that represented the insurer, and we ended up choosing to adopt local regulations that tracked the state regulations. Now, what has come to light is that the state regulation with respect to daycare providers is too narrow, probably. I mean, that's ultimately your decision, but there are 2 types of licensed daycares. There's child care centers, and those are addressed in the state regulations. You can't have a marijuana business within 1,000 feet of a child care center. You have to be licensed by the state, and those are non-residential type child care centers that may be in a church, maybe in a separate building. It's a business. There are more onerous staff and education and training requirements. But of course, there are many licensed residential daycare providers, and the statute and the regulations talk about them or describe them as family home child care centers or providers. And Ms. Squires earlier this evening is an example of someone who is licensed under a different chapter as a family home care child care provider. And the state regulations do not address her type of daycare facility, and nor do yours. So the question for the council, regardless of whether she's within 1,000 feet of one of these future businesses or not, I still think the question for you to ask yourself is whether you wish to amend your code. Because if it's not her, it may be somebody else in a few months or years. So we've prepared this for discussion only. It didn't seem to staff like this was an emergency that we needed to push through tonight. We could certainly bring it, and with two of your fellow colleagues missing, you might not want to do that anyway, but we can certainly bring it back anytime you want, as early as the 24th. But we wanted to give you a draft ordinance to consider. The ordinance changes just one section of the chapter on recreational marijuana, and it expands the definition of daycare providers that are going to be subject to this 1,000-foot buffer. It specifically references the family home child care provider, and then I also added nursery and preschools, which are a different category, but my experience with a few other cities is that they tend to, those that have expanded this definition have included nurseries, schools, and preschools, so I thought I'd at least give you that option. The other amendment that's part of that same section in the draft ordinance then defines what each of those terms means, so there's no confusion. The definitions come straight out of the RCW. I did not make these up. I just copied them straight from the RCW, so they match what the state law and state regulations already use. So in a nutshell, that's the issue for discussion, and staff's looking for direction about whether you'd like us, whether you have questions, whether you would like us to bring this back to you. Finally, I would just point out that we're aware, we're a little unclear whether it's 3 or 4, but they're in the industrial park is the only part of the city where producers and processors can operate. There are at least 3 applications for properties in that industrial park that are pending, and there may be a 4th. We're a little unclear. That does not mean by any means that all 3 or 4 are going to be approved. But is it possible one will be approved? It probably is possible. So you're likely to have a producer or processor in that industrial park, likely to be more than 1,000 feet from this Ms. Squire's daycare provider, but not guaranteed. But as I say, this 1,000-foot issue is likely to come up somewhere else in the city, so I think she did a service by bringing it to our attention and letting you now have a chance to weigh in on how you'd like to handle it in the city. Thank you.
Yes.
We're all going to have
I was just going to say, Greg, I think when the state puts these regulations together, you're always going to have these kind of things where something's overlooked. But I think that it's obvious that the intent is to not put these growing operations within 1,000 feet of where children are gathered. And I think what you've done with a draft resolution has my support, and I would like to see the 1,000-foot buffer apply to the entities that you've described, these home daycare centers and the other kind of children's gathering facilities, so that we just provide the buffer that the state is giving to every other facility of the same nature.
Okay. Mr. Cartwright.
I had a few questions. The first question that I had relates to the page 2 of 3 of the draft ordinance. And it's section 5C. In section 5A, the child care center goes on and describes what it is, and there's a clause in there that says, and is licensed. In section B, family daycare provider, it goes on and describes what it is, and it says, and is licensed. The nursery school is absent and is licensed. Is there a particular reason for that?
It goes back to my earlier statement that I copied the language straight out of the RCW that defines these. It's quite possible there is a license for a nursery school. But in the RCW that I was using, it didn't reference one. I'd be happy to look into that, Councilmember Cartwright, and add that if you'd prefer.
Well, if we can, there's going to be 2 follow-on questions. One, would that absence of that in his license mean that anybody at any point in time in the future, if if a grower or a retail outlet wanted to pop up and somebody was within 1,000 feet, say, I take care of kids, it's a nursery school, whether it's licensed or not. That would be my first question. Second question, do we know at all throughout this, has anybody looked at the actual residential licenses that are held to see what it would do to the potential zoning that we've already approved as far as the locations?
Well, when we did our original map that showed the blacked out areas, which were the 1,000-foot buffers, we did do a search on the internet looking for people who advertised the service in addition to those that were known centers. We did not do a search for residential home centers because we didn't know that was a separate category, but we did try to pick those up through another means. So I think we may have captured some of them, but there's probably some more that could be added to that map and which may distort things further. So that map does need to be updated, and unfortunately our GIS person is on maternity leave at the moment, so I'm doing the best I can with it, but I actually can't find that particular map that she had made, and I'm not sure where the data for it is, so it may take me some time.
Then my last...
We wouldn't be needing to do that unless they decided they wanted to include these other groups, right?
Well, I think, I guess you potentially want to see what the implications of that are on the city.
I would, for my last question, and that would be any potential litigation risk if we change this ordinance now after we've passed it and all these applicants wind up being out of luck because we now have told them they can't operate.
Right. So that's a good question, and it was one I was going to address a little later. So one of the reasons we initially, you as a city council, initially chose to adopt regulations that mimicked the state regulations was there was virtually no risk of litigation if your regulations matched the state's. So that's one end of the continuum. The other end of the continuum are the cities that have chosen to outright ban all marijuana uses, and they are headed for court. I mean, there was finally a lawsuit filed against the city of Wenatchee, and either that becomes the test case for everybody in the state or some other city will. But, you know, in terms of litigation risk, we chose the practically zero risk, and cities that banned it chose a high risk. And then somewhere, you know, you start moving in the continuum as you adopt regulations that are more restrictive than the state regulations. This proposal would be more restrictive because it addresses a category of daycare facilities which are not covered by state law. What is the risk of litigation in that scenario? The state the Liquor Control Board, and Ms. Squires referred to this earlier and didn't get it quite right, but she was close. The state's position is if someone applies for a state license and they meet our requirements, we will issue a state license. Now, that doesn't mean that applicant, that permittee, doesn't need to also meet local requirements, but to the extent the local requirements are more restrictive or would prevent them from exercising their rights under a state-issued license, there may be, I mean, that's where you get a potential for a lawsuit. Someone has a state license to operate, they're within 1,000 feet of a daycare, of a family-run daycare. State law says that's perfectly fine. Local law says that's not allowed. That's where no one knows what's going to happen until someone is sued and the courts resolve that. So a little riskier as we move away from, as we move towards regulations that are more restrictive than the states, but it seems like a small risk and a good policy. It's certainly, you know, I haven't heard anybody say this, but boy, I would think cities would lobby the Liquor Control Board to revise their regulations and cover this. I don't know why it was omitted. It doesn't make any sense. The rationale, as Councilmember Child said, is exactly the same. So why wouldn't you?
Yeah, why separate the two types?
Can I ask a question, Mr. Mayor? If if the, up in the industrial park, if we look at the map that you've given us here, they could actually do a grow operation in part of that dirt.
Yeah.
But not
Well,
all of it.
The green areas are areas where the city staff believes applications have in fact been submitted.
So they're out of the 1,000-mile radius anyway.
1,000 foot, yeah.
Right.
1,000 foot.
What my
I'll go with a 1,000-mile radius.
But what my question is if you have a established grow operation that's been there for a year or two,
right.
and then someone wants to start a daycare
Right.
next door,
Right.
you know, what happens at that point?
You can't you can't make the processor grower move.
Okay.
They
Or-
got there first. And
Okay.
there's nothing to stop the daycare from going in. That's their choice.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the same with retail.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So once the business is established, they're established.
Correct.
Correct. Okay.
Greg, are there, oh, sorry, go ahead. Are there also municipalities who did not go with a 1,000-foot buffer? Is there another standard, or do you think everyone either accepted the 1,000-foot standard or they banned it? I mean, were those the two choices?
I'm not positive, Councilmember Chang. There could be some cities, I know, for example, the city of Tacoma uses 600 feet for medical marijuana. And so it could be that they decided to be consistent and used 600 feet for recreational as well. I'm not sure. I wouldn't be surprised if some cities did use a shorter distance.
I'm sure the standard is arbitrary, whatever it is, and there will always be exceptions when you have residential next to an industrial area. I am sensitive to this daycare's perceived plight, but I also feel that her residence is not in the city limits, so it sort of pains me a little bit that we might curtail the activity from an industrial center, of which we have so little.
Except that the areas that have been set aside or are presumed aren't in that buffer, so it would not affect that. For the most part, it doesn't affect very many places.
If it's any consolation, I asked that question too. This 1,000-foot it goes across lots of borders, city to city, city to county, but it's still, some of them are regulated 1,000 feet, even if it goes between two cities, right?
Yeah, and I can't remember what Kitsap County has adopted.
I can't either. I don't know.
It seems to be less for some reason than 1,000. I don't know if they even, is it, that's why I'm wondering if they just didn't adopt a buffer, or I don't know exactly.
Question.
Different figure, but I would really like to see the map that once Nick is able to generate it, to see what the differences are, because now if you look at the city, it looks like it's 90% black. We have very few areas where anything is permitted. I don't know how much that would change. Would we go from 90 to 91%, or would it be, yeah. So I would like to see that map before making a decision.
Well, it would be possible to create that maybe before the next council meeting, or?
Maybe.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, okay, all right. So
I will, if I have to, I can call Stephanie and ask her where those files are. She said she'd be fine if I had any questions like that, but if I need to add a bunch of data or do that research,
okay,
it may
so
be.
let's leave it.
Okay.
Let's see what we can do.
But just so I understand, the request would be to identify licensed family daycare providers within the city, and then see how or if that modifies the earlier map. Is that right?
Yes.
I think, wouldn't it include nursery schools and
It already did.
Yeah, the
It
three
did.
preschools also? Those would be included in that new map.
It would have included that.
Because this is just the county.
This is new language.
Also, is this sort of land use action something that we would generally have go through the planning commission or hearing examiner, or is it just strictly to the council?
I think you only have to send it to them if you want their advice on it, and it's a pretty specific issue, so that's a lot of extra steps.
And there, it does seem to me, while this is not an emergency that requires action tonight, I'd like to speak to a comment someone made earlier, which is, there are pending applications in this area, for example, the industrial park area. The state's position apparently is that if there are local restrictions, they make sure to tell applicants affected by those local restrictions that there are local hurdles that we, the state, don't address. We're just putting you on notice that when you go to get your local business license, you may be surprised. It would make sense to me that if the council is inclined to change the code, that we do that sooner rather than later, so that can be communicated to the Liquor Control Board so they can let these applicants know. I don't think it's going to change anybody's mind, but it puts the city in a stronger position if we make the changes before the licenses are issued.
And if a license was issued, then even if these folks were inside of the 1,000-foot, they'd be licensed, they'd be vetted.
Well, they're going to get licensed by the state no matter what, but I think it puts us in a stronger position to enforce any change you adopt if we've made that change before these state licenses are issued. So if we can have more discussion on June 24th and take action subject to you getting the questions answered you've asked, I think that would be ideal.
Yes, Mr. Cartwright.
And you said that you can go ahead and add "and is licensed" to the nursery. You could do that?
Yes,
Okay.
I made a note to do that, Councilmember Cartwright.
I wasn't sure you could just do that or not. So great, thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? All right. Seeing no more discussion, we'll move on to amended item E, discussion of Cascade natural gas lease, or gas fees.
And I just had a couple questions for Mr. Jacoby. At our last meeting, you indicated that that agreement required 5 votes of the council rather than 4. Can you explain to me why?
The flip answer is because the RCW says so.
Okay, I mean, is it because it's a particular type of agreement?
Because it's a franchise, yes.
Because it's a
yes,
franchise.
It's specific to franchise agreements.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was, I didn't know whether it was, that answers that question. I didn't know if it was that or because we had the fee increase in there. And my next question became about, again, the fee increase that's embedded in that particular franchise agreement. And my question is, can that section, the way it is right now, to me, that's hard-coded in the agreement. And my question is, can we change that section so that it would allow us to have adjustments up to 6% per the RCW in the future with a certain number of months to give them to implement it, rather than hard-coding it at the present time?
So at present, it talks about 2% increases on specific dates.
Correct.
Leading up to 6%.
Correct.
Cumulative. And I'm sorry.
And my question is, can that section simply say that the city has the right to adjust the franchise fee periodically, giving them, up to 6%?
Yes.
Giving them a certain notice, and then it would be my understanding that we'd probably have to amend the agreement to to actually do increases.
Yes.
And let me also just say why I'm asking this is, with a vote of 5, needing 5 votes, I don't want the city and not to have a franchise agreement with Cascade Natural Gas. I do not want to be in a situation where we let that lapse. I'm not sure that I'm going to be prepared on the 24th to vote in favor of an increase. I have not been able to complete my due diligence. I'm hoping to get that done in the next 2 weeks, and I was looking for an alternative that would allow us to keep the franchise agreement in place while we did more due diligence on the fee increase.
On language in the agreement, you really wouldn't even, you always have that authority, so to increase it, so you really wouldn't even have to add anything that says the city reserves authority to increase the fee at a later date, because you have that authority. So it would seem to me the simpler approach, if that's the will of the majority, would be to just leave it at 2%. And knowing that you at any time can amend the agreement, would require 5 votes to increase it to 3, 4, 5, up to 6.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Thank you for the clarification, because currently the way it's presented to us, it's like, this is the agreement, you vote for it or not, and you're voting for 2% increases on specified dates.
Yes.
And if there are not 5 votes to pass this agreement as presented to us, it would not pass, and we would be without an agreement with Cascade Natural Gas, which I think none of us want. I think we do want an agreement. We're just not quite sure how we feel about the increase in the franchise tax. So I guess I would just say the way it's been presented to us, we did not think there was any flexibility, except it's either yes or no. You have an agreement or you don't. It's 6%, or you have no agreement.
Yeah. And I apologize if I misinterpreted the council's direction, but I could have sworn that in a work study session, that was I was asked to prepare it
I
in
think
that form.
certain council members
Yeah.
felt that was the direction they wanted to go in.
Yes, I think that's accurate. But I'm glad you're clarifying that there's flexibility, because there is.
Okay.
So, as far as June 24th, do we need to have that rewritten?
Well, I guess for the record, there's certain answers I need, there's certain due diligence I need to do, and it involves other expenses, an analysis of the budget, an analysis of projected revenue, an analysis of what we may be needing to do in the future as far as our citizens are concerned. And I want to be perfectly clear on that before I vote to do any increase. And so I don't know that I'm going to have that completed by June 24th. At the same time, I don't want to be absent an agreement with Cascade Natural Gas.
Right. So I'm asking you, I'm asking all of us, do we want to have an option at our June 24th meeting to have just what was described, as taking the specific language out about the increases, but having a franchise agreement in place with the option, as Greg described, of increasing it when we saw a need for it later on, when we had more information, instead of coming with the exact same thing that we had a couple of weeks ago?
I think that would be the prudent course, because we don't know if we're going to have 5 votes or not, and if we don't, we might as well just
So
keep
have an option available?
Yeah. So I can think of 2 ways to do it then. One would be to, on your June 24th agenda, there would be alternative agreements, alternative motions, or I could just bring you one, which would now read as in the way we've been discussing it tonight. And I don't care which way we do it, whether I bring you 1 or 2.
Because we have 2 council members absent tonight, I would bring 2 alternatives.
Yep. Okay, good. That's what we'll do.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. That concludes the business items, and we'll move on to reports of various committees. Mr. Clausen isn't here. Does anybody have any report on finance?
Yeah, I can tell you. Basically, we discussed the economic numbers came out. They were pretty good. They're positive. Sales tax up 4%, which is actually the percentage that we've averaged over the whole year. The whole year.
Is that first quarter?
No,
through May?
no, this is
Just a month.
May. This
Through
May
May,
is up
okay.
4%. But for the whole year, we're also up 4%.
Okay.
Like last month in April, we were up 16%. So anyway, we're ahead of projections. This is positive. We're ahead of projections on excise tax, and that's good. We also discussed reserves and how we're doing with that. It's always been our hope to put together a 3-month reserve, which would be, I think, 1.4 million. I think right now we're at 590,000 in reserve, so we're getting there. And we hope to keep moving in that direction to be more fiscally sound and the like. We also discussed unfunded liabilities, and while we don't have a report at this time, it's something that we're all concerned about, things that we can see coming down the pike and we're concerned about, and we discussed those, but we don't have a report on that. That's about it.
Thank you.
I have a question for Jerry. Do you recall if there was discussion of, somebody said it's a TBD. I think that's like a transportation benefit district or a transit benefit, transit benefit district.
Transportation.
Meeting?
Transportation benefit district.
At this meeting?
Yeah, do you recall? I just heard that it was discussed in passing, so I don't know if there was a great deal of discussion about
Frankly, I
it.
don't remember that.
Okay.
All right. Economic development and tourism. Ms. Ashby.
That would be me. We met yesterday, and our first agenda item was our wayfinding system, and Nick gave an update on the process and progress of that. We're pleased with that. Then we discussed for a while the concept of centers, and we offered input on the boundary ideas, basically what we had discussed earlier in this evening's meeting. We also discussed the comp plan presentation by the University of Washington grad students. We highlighted our discussion on the connection to community piece that they gave us and the use of social media. And if you read the report they gave us, and again, their audio report that they gave us, the verbal report they gave us the other night, they did talk about connecting with the community and use of social media. And what came out of our economic development meeting was, as a continued means of community outreach, the committee decided to host a booth at the Fathoms of Fun vendor show with displays of perhaps our McCormick Woods Park project and other current activities the city's doing. And we would invite all the council members to join us at the booth. I believe we're just going to do it 2 days. Is that correct, Mayor?
That's the way I understand it.
Yeah, we were just going to do it 2 days. And that would be Saturday and Sunday, June 28th and 29th. So it would be an opportunity for council to connect with our community and just present to everyone kind of ideas of what we're doing. Yeah. And then we, I guess what I'm going to say is, as chair of the Economic Development Committee, Visit Kitsap forwarded to me a request for city information from a builder that's located in Kirkland. And Visit Kitsap responded with a very nice email and some regional marketing material. And I followed up with more local information. But it made me very aware that information is not easily accessible. It was not easily accessible for me to forward to the builder. So our committee discussed the need for perhaps a media kit or a common place for appropriate marketing material and how these requests should be handled. I forwarded to the builder a link to our video, a link to a video the chamber had, and some other material that I could put together and send. But it just, again, made that community outreach a little more, it brought it in focus to us that we need to start having some discussions on how we can do that maybe a little more efficiently and a little more transparently to people.
It's always a concern to negotiate our website and for people to extract information.
Right.
You know, I know Brandy's been working hard on it, and with limited resources, I would add, but that's a concern of mine.
Yeah.
I think we wanted to put in a plug for the search module for the website that would make our search more useful. For example, one of us, it wasn't me, it might have been Jeff, that was talking about traffic, and we looked for a specific traffic item with those search words, and it didn't find it. It was just like...
Yeah, I did. I spent quite a bit of time. This particular person had requested information on our trails, and
those trails.
Yeah, and there was some county information I could find on trails. At any rate, it just made me very, very aware of the restrictions we have right now to respond. I would have liked to have said, because it's a builder, that we have X number of acres available and yada, 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 this property zone, yada, yada, and I didn't have any of that at my fingertip. And as a council member, it's probably not my job to be forwarding that anyway. But, we don't have anyone, we just don't have that in a neat place. So, anyway, that's what we talked about at Economic Development.
Yeah, it's a work in progress because I'm not sure some of the things you just mentioned is even available to us, to anybody,
Yeah,
So,
right.
Yeah. So that's a good idea, and then we need to follow it up with funding so that we can get that kind of numbers and things. Yeah, good idea. Thank you. Oh, is that it?
For Economic Development.
Okay. Mr. Lucarelli, do you have any on utility committee?
Just that we'll be meeting June 20th, and there's a change of the location to Homemade Cafe.
Okay.
8 o'clock. Thank you.
Okay. All right, very good. Thank you. Public property, Mr. Cartwright?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We met yesterday at 8:30 and right here in this room. Our first order of business was actually what we heard on our first public comment regarding the traffic revisions for the 4th of July, and I believe Mr. Dorsey was going to do some additional research and give us an update for the department head briefing, so I'll let him finish that. Mr. Dorsey also presented with us the results of the survey boundaries for the Paul Power Park, and the committee recommended to take 3 additional steps as a result of that survey. The first one would be to share with the adjacent property owners, and I believe they're all located on the south boundary, if I'm correct, Mr. Dorsey, to share with them the results of the survey that would indicate that some of them perhaps have encroached into the city park, give them an opportunity to look at that boundary and express a desire to either challenge or not. And we can kind of figure out where we are from there. The other thing that we'd asked Mr. Dorsey to do was to develop a budget for an immediate use type of situation for the upper level of that park, whether it was just removing some blackberries and making the turf a little bit better. I think a number of 25 to 30,000 was kind of floated out there, but we really didn't know what it would take to get that upper level grassy area up to snuff if Pee Wee football or other groups wanted to use it. And then the third area that we discussed was having Mr. Dorsey develop, and I think with Mr. Bond as well, if I remember, some sort of a vision idea for an upper only development and an upper and lower area development. There's about a 20 to 30 foot drop between the upper and the lower, and it would appear from the topography maps that it would be a good candidate for a tiered level type of upper field, lower field type of thing. So that was interesting discussion, and we look forward to hearing some more work and feedback on that. We received some information from Mr. Reinerson regarding a residential request for a speed bump on Division Street. We discussed that, and we are going to recommend to the Public Works Department to look in putting in a stop sign and or painting on the street to slow down. We're not keen on speed bumps in general, but it's an actual hard left turn on the map, and I didn't bring it with me, but we think a stop sign will serve the purpose of slowing traffic down in that area. We discussed a request to put in a movie kiosk, for lack of a better term, think Redbox, downtown area near where the foot ferry ingress and egress is. And we weren't in favor of having that sole Redbox by itself. Way down on our list of importance, we did suggest that if part of the downtown or waterfront comp plan or overlay or anything were to have an opportunity to look at a vending area or a vending strip, that perhaps at that point in time, a design that would include power, security, appropriate concrete and all of that stuff could be designed in to be, this would be the vending area, whether it's for sodas or movies or whatever, instead of a vending machine here and one over here and one over there. And then we had another discussion on public art. And I think where we left that was that we'll hear another presentation from the committee, from the interested parties, based on the input from council from our last work study session, which was, our understanding was limited duration and on one selected wall. And so we'll see what we have to bring back after our next meeting, which will be July, hang on one second.
13? 12. Oh, no, wrong month.
I believe it's July 14th. 8:30 here. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Lodging Tax Advisory Committee, Mr. Chang.
I'm going to be talking with Brandy about setting up a schedule for the committee members so they know when we'll meet, and this timeline will also have like the deadlines by when people need to apply and when they will be interviewed by the committee. The only thing that I would actually like to ask council for is if you have a similar direction like last year that you wanted to fund Visit Kitsap to a certain amount. For example, last year we found out after that we did want to go with the 15,000, which was sort of their minimum. So this is something to think about. I believe that the Visit Kitsap person, executive director, will be speaking to us about a new proposal that she has for their funding. Is that going to be in the next month or so? Or?
Yeah, it's scheduled for the June's work study session.
Oh, next week. Okay. I believe she's going to be telling us about alternate ways that she would like to suggest being funded, and she may have suggestions for how we handle that funding. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. Chimes and Lights, Ms. Lucarelli.
We will actually be meeting starting again in August, and we'll be going great guns then. That way we won't collide with some of the other festivals, and I've already been kind of laying a little bit of groundwork. People are coming prepared to that August meeting to really discuss a lot of ideas. Thank you.
Okay, Waterfront Plans Visioning Subcommittee, Mr. Jones.
Nothing to report.
Okay. Outside Agency, Ms. Ashby.
Yes, Thursday is the PSRC Transpol meeting and also the KRCC Transpol meeting. So I will be able to report at our next council meeting.
Okay, thank you.
And I will also say the next Economic Development Committee is July 14th at 10 o'clock.
Mr. Carter. Oh, sorry.
Right here in council chambers.
Okay. Very good. Mr. Cartwright, any reports?
I'm only on alternates on other outside committees, and so if Beck has a report, then I won't have one, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Any other reports? No. Okay. Mayor's report. I'd like to tell everybody we have a city newsletter, e-newsletter. It's on the website. It's also, there's some copies on the back table in the hallway. We've created a mayor's report on city parks. It's an updated report on most of our city parks. It excludes some of the very tiny places that basically are nothing more than just planter areas and stuff like that, but it does cover the major parks. That's available online. It's also available in the back of the room. To go with the parks idea, I'm going to be doing a June 21st Port Orchard Parks Tour, which is Saturday, June 21st. And if you get a hold of anybody at City Hall, call City Hall's number and reserve a seat. It's an actual walk around the parks, and we'll be leaving at 9:30 here. That's a Saturday morning. Last about 2 hours, and we'll check out the major improvements and the ideas that we're hopefully going to go forward with in the next year or two. So it might be fun to come and see your parks and understand them a little bit better. So please come. And let's see, I have a town hall meeting scheduled for this coming Thursday, June 12th at 6:30. And if you've been to a council or a town hall meeting, you understand it is pretty much open for whatever subject you would like to bring up. And then we talk about that until we talk it to death, and then we'll start on another subject. So it's very informal. We sit in more or less a round configuration, and we pass the mic around. It's not a particular time for me to tell you how smart I am, because I'm not. It's a time for you to tell me what you'd like to see your city to look like, or what's bothering you, or anything in between those subjects. So please come to that this coming Thursday night at 6:30 in this very room. I just did a God Bless America concert and had some folks from around the Pacific Northwest named Breath of Air Choir put that on. I hosted it out at Christ the Rock Church in McCormick Woods area. And I also did some Point of Lights awards for that. I've been doing Points of Light awards twice a year, which are intended to thank people that normally don't get very much of the spotlight. And I did 6 of those, and the God Bless America concert was all about the military and the military contact that we have here every day in the Northwest, and especially city of Port Orchard. So bear with me, I want to read just 2 of the recipients, a little bio about 2 of them. I'll read 2 each council meeting. The first recipient was Alfred Kofelt Jr., and Alfred served and retired from the U.S. Army. He's presently serving in Post 30 American Legion right here in Port Orchard as a post commander. He is also the post real estate manager, and he laughed and said sometimes he's a janitor too at the post. But so he's always working for his post. But Alfred is also active with the Knights of Epiphius, and has been for many years. He's also an active member of the Saints Car Club, and he works on the Saints Car Club projects, which, if you know anything about Port Orchard, they're constantly working for the city of Port Orchard and all of its residents. So thank you, Alfred. And the next candidate that got the award was Michael Countryman. Michael's a young man serving in the Navy as a fire control technician. He served in the Navy for 9 years. He served on the USS Alabama, and then he volunteered to serve overseas with the U.S. Army in Afghanistan. I talked to his wife that night, and I'm going, well, he's back, he's safe, what do you think? And she says, I don't think he's going to volunteer again for that. So, but anyway, he did serve overseas in Afghanistan. And when he's here, he volunteers for crew maintenance on the USS Turner Joy. And so that's a real busman's holiday. He's a submariner, and then on his day off, he goes and works on a tin can. But if you knew this man, if you see this man, thank him, because he's just that kind of guy. He lives right here in Port Orchard with his wife, Janine, and children, Braden and Isabella. He's a member of the VFW Post 2669, one right downtown. He volunteers at the Veterans Home in Retzel. And he has received many commendations. One is the Joint Force Commendation Medal, Army Achievement Medal, Afghan Campaign Medal, and he's earned the Info Dominance Warfare Design Specialist Award, and he's recently been promoted to Chief. So what a young man, 9 years, and he's done all of that. He's really the real deal. So Michael Countryman, thank you so very much for your service. And if you ever run into him, you can't miss him. He's about 6'2", and he's about, I don't know, very thin. but just a wonderful young man and wonderful family, and we're very proud to have him here in the city of Port Orchard. So that's concludes my report, and we'll go on with department head reports. Mr. Dorsey.
Thank you, Your Honor, council members. So you heard the previous comments by Mrs. Whittleton, so I will try to explain best I can the results of my investigation. Well, investigation is kind of harsh, but okay. So I talked to George Thompson and Jay Cookson. George lives on Tracy. Jay has a sister that's on Tracy, so they're always up there on the 4th of July. Basically, what they told me is in the past, Tracy was set up as one of the detour routes, and we've used it for other sorts of activities, like when Bay Street seawall was being built. Over the past 2 years, they actually modified that due to a influence from a past council member. So Olney actually has a detour placed in the last 2 years. Olney has actually had a detour sign, but the police are stationed for the westbound traffic on Beach Drive at Tracy, where they have to turn up because it's a one-way road coming in. But the detour is actually trying to get as many people up Olney as possible. There's also a detour sign at the Mile Hill Roundabout, and then there's a policeman stationed at Mitchell and Bay Street, where they're letting the people come through on the one-way route on Bay Street until it's full, and then they're routed up Mitchell. But there hasn't been in the last 2 years an actual detour sign at Mitchell and DeKalb. The issue I think that we're having is that people will still tend to go there to get up to that high point to look at the fireworks, so I don't really know what to do about that. I think what we're really trying to do is capture those people that are getting through town that way and not really going up there to participate. So George and Jay suggested that what we added to Beach Drive a couple years ago is some local access only event ahead signage as they came up to the detour. And what we're thinking about doing this year is right there at the stoplight at Kentucky Fried Chicken, is as you're coming eastbound through town, we'll have that same sort of signage so that if there are people coming into town and they don't want to go up in that area, they're not falsely led to turning left at the light and then heading up, and now they hit Mitchell and they don't really know where to go, so then they start following cars. So really that's the best we can do as far as add that additional signage and see what happens. But I guess in response, we haven't actually been detouring traffic on Tracy for the last 2 or 3 years. So that's what I know.
Okay.
Question for you, Mark. Do you know what the sign on the roundabout will say? For example, I heard last year that one of the vendors felt it said something like all the Bay Street stores were closed. So
Do you
remember
think you're
that?
mistaking that for the parade.
Okay.
We had that issue where some businesses had complained that they felt like the policemen that was stationed at the roundabout actually were directing people from there. But that's a different scenario because you have cars coming down that with the parade going on, they have to turn around and go back up the hill. So we did add signage this last year that said local businesses are open, but the police officer stationed at the roundabout would still inquire as to, what are you going down there for? Because, you can't turn right or left during the parade. They have to do a U-turn and come back up. So I think that's what you're referring to. So I think we'll do the additional signage this year and see what happens.
Okay. Does that conclude your report?
Oh, and then as far as so we've got the van scheduled for the 21st. We are going to, Community Services is going to put the back seats in.
Okay.
But just kind of a reminder that there is kind of a number. So if we could get a reservation, how many people sooner than later, then we know if we have to round up additional vehicles. I think the community service van might be 12.
Okay, right now we have 3 reserved.
Okay. So
my thought,
Not including-
Mark, my thought was that once we have the van full, then the other folks will have to just follow.
Okay,
In their private, we're not going to try to do
yeah,
it
and we're
all.
gonna, I think
So there's
Bill-
12 seats, including the driver?
I'll have to confirm that.
A number, okay.
But, so we're gonna provide the driver, so, I'll confirm the number of seats tomorrow, and we'll just kind of keep that tally.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Bond?
Yes, thank you. So first of all, in response to what the UW students provided us as far as how people are communicating with the city or getting their information, it was pretty shocking to me that most people found out about that process on Facebook. And as a result, I've talked to my staff, and we've come up with what we think is going to be a better way to provide public notice for different events. First of all, we've created a new public notices page on our website where we're going to put all public notices so that they're easier to find, and it'll be an all-encompassing list. And then selectively from that, any issues which are likely to be controversial or for which we have good graphics, we're going to then have them put on Facebook as much as possible, and that way they'll be everything that goes on Facebook will be duplicate, but hopefully we can make sure that only things that are going to catch people's attention go on Facebook, so that people, at least for our issues, are seeing exciting projects or big projects or controversial projects, and not notices about a new wireless antenna or something like that. So anyway, so we're trying to improve our communication through social media. Next, at the beginning of the meeting, one of the citizen comments had to do with a geologically hazardous area. I just wanted to let you know that there is an investigation on that property. Our code enforcement officer was on a long vacation at the beginning of the month, and so we're trying to schedule a meeting with Public Works, code enforcement, and myself and the attorney to sort of work out some code interpretation issues, and we'll be responding accordingly once we've done that. Finally, we had asked for a short 10-minute executive session tonight to discuss real estate transaction, and I think hopefully it'll be less than 10 minutes, but should be pretty simple.
Okay. Attorney, Mr. Jacoby? Clerk Reinerson?
I have a few things, but first I'm going to pass out something. I failed to do that at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay.
Okay, so I just have a couple things here. I got a list, so you guys can look at the list while I'm talking and soak it all in. So last couple weeks, my office has been dealing with some claims management, and I think it's important to acknowledge a couple of Public Works employees who were faced with a serious safety hazard. And I think that the actions that they took really was in the best interest of the city. Could have been a lot worse. So I'm just going to read you what I had wrote to them. And so basically, this is for Mark Farnier and Von Nix. And I just wanted them to let them know that, as you may already know, sometimes the work that we do goes unsaid. I personally wanted to thank them for showing that they take the city's safety standards seriously. The nature of their position always creates a risk of potential hazards on a daily basis. Actions to certain incidents can be always prevented with proper guidance by being aware of the surroundings, continuing to be educated on the importance of safety, and the ability to react in a calm and collective manner. Both of them showed that they are very and highly skilled in all of those areas. As the city's risk manager, I was impressed with their ability to maintain professionalism in a very difficult situation. With that, I commend them and applaud them for their quick actions in not only protecting their life, but the lives of the citizens around them. So I think it's important. There was an incident that occurred. It's being investigated right now by our insurance company, but it could have been a lot worse. So I just want to thank them. So that was one of them. The other thing is I want to remind the council that I believe we have scheduled a group council photo
right before next meeting, June 24th. So I'll probably send out a reminder on Friday when Janine gets back, so just to confirm that we're still set for the 24th. Another thing is that the legal notice for the gas tax, or the possible gas tax increase, will be published in the Kitsap Sun on the 12th, Thursday, and then also published in the POI on the 20th, and then it was also already noticed on the 6th. And then before you, I presented the results of the council retreat date. So we still don't have 100% attendance. So at this point, I'm just not quite sure if we want to hold the meeting with the most attended council members. Do we want to push this out to July? Just not quite sure what the direction to me is from council.
I guess, Brandy, it's my understanding that staff's also going to be at this meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we should be included in the doodle poll.
Okay. I was hoping I'd had a consensus from the council and then I could invite staff, but
I think my calendar's pretty full, so.
Yeah.
I don't know, what's your pleasure?
You know, we don't even have an agenda for this retreat, do we?
not yet.
Other than the training, right?
I'm sorry?
The training, but that could be done anytime?
Actually, the AWC has confirmed that they will be doing the training at the July work study session, so this will be a separate retreat. So I'll just email the results to you guys, so that way the other two council members that aren't here have that as well, and then I'll just throw out some options and we can go from there.
Well, we could
That
put it
work?
on, we could put it on the work study for discussion too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think June's work study session is pretty light since we swapped July and June, so. And then just to give you an update that myself and the IT person, we've met with some vendors to discuss various types of phone equipment, so hopefully in the next couple months we'll have something to bring forward to you guys. And then lastly, we received 2 bids for the city's official newspaper, of which will be scheduled for the June 24th City Council meeting for action. Other than that, that's all I have.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I would like to, Brandy, if you could extend our appreciation to Janine and your other staff members who worked on Relay for Life this last weekend. They did a very nice job and represented the city at Relay for Life, and I know they raised, I thought Janine said over $2,000 for the American Cancer Society. So we do appreciate that staff participates and represents our city very well. Thank you.
I will pass it along.
Okay. Any other comments?
Well,
Okay.
as Mark pointed out, there was no Mr. Relay this year. I think the prior Mr. Relay was pretty hurt that
he broke
he
a
did
lot of
not
cameras,
win.
I'll
So
tell you.
he felt
You've heard it.
it was felt that the judging was a little slighted, so he declined the offer this year.
He broke a lot of cameras. Wow. It was like watching a train wreck, you know. So anyway, all right.
Oh, I'm sorry, I failed to, one more item.
Okay, sorry.
I know this is really early, but I think the treasurer needs this to update the budget timeline that's going to be presented at the work study session. And so this year, Veterans Day falls on November 11th, which is a Tuesday, which is our normal council meeting. And normally, well, I don't know, I haven't been here when that meeting was canceled, but the code states that if it falls on a holiday, that the meeting will resume the next business day, which would be Wednesday. So you have 2 options. One, just have the meeting on Wednesday, or you can cancel it. However, that is also the meeting that the revenue, setting the property tax levy is normally held. So I just want to confirm that the council wants to continue to have that meeting on Wednesday, November 12th. I know it's early, but
Say Wednesday would be fine.
forward.
Talk about it again next week at work study when we have the other 2 here.
Okay.
If that'd be all right.
Looks like you have a majority
We'll
in
do
this
that.
meeting, but we'll.
I'm fine, but,
All right, that's everything.
All right. All right, we're at citizens' comments. If you'd like to make, please.
Thank you. I want to thank Mark Dorsey for investigating the traffic route. We really appreciate the chance that it could make a difference and the people that helped you. Thank you. And also thank our mayor for the concert. It was absolutely wonderful, and I understand that Helpline received $12,000 in donations, which I thought was pretty huge. Also, in relationship to what Councilwoman Ashby stated, I had some thoughts concerning the natural gas potential rise, and so I'll just go ahead with what I originally wrote. I understand we will soon be asked our input regarding incrementally raising the excise tax on Cascade natural gas, which will be passed along to the public. I want you to know my feelings on this are mixed, as I am not convinced we are using our current resources to the highest and most efficient good. Namely, two things, which may appear to be inconsequential, and yet they speak volumes when one thinks of their intent. Number one, I remain extremely dissatisfied with the fact that the Utility and Finance Committee meetings continue to be held in restaurants and that the public is footing the bill. We are essentially paying more for less. In attending the last Finance Committee meeting, as lovely as it was to be welcomed and provided handouts, it was ridiculously noisy and not at all equal to the facilities we all paid for to be utilized for the purpose of conducting city business and providing transparency. Although I sat only 2 seats away from the committee, I had to strain to be sure I didn't miss anything being said. When the tape comes out, I will review, but I hold little hope that it will sound any better than the last one, which took 3 times of listening to get the full picture of what was being said. I don't have time for this nonsense. I want to go to the information, review the minutes, and be done with it. And I believe that is what we are paying for. Why are we paying for the resources if they are not fully being utilized? Number 2, I want to know if the tax is approved, the council will be good stewards of the increased revenue. Although, to the best of my knowledge, the option has not been exercised, one still remembers $3,000 were budgeted for a 3-minute timer. All being said, I want to know we are getting the best value for the dollars presently in place before we start asking for more. A ballpark figure on Finance and Utility Committee breakfast based on figures available estimate out at $1,200 annually, and the $3,000 allotted for a 3-minute timer bring the amount to $4,200. I would appreciate better spent. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Okay.
Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Cartwright.
I'd like to address the timer. The timer issue was my request to put in the budget, and there's 2 reasons for that. First, the mayor doesn't have to put himself in a hot seat to warn people or to let them know their 3 minutes is up. The purpose of the timer is a green light, yellow light, red light. The clerk can activate that at the start of the 3-minute window, and when you get to 2:45, it starts to flash yellow, and everybody in the room knows the 3 minutes is up. It's how other municipalities deal with it. It's a way to control the meeting and move the meeting along so that it's efficient. Again, the best use of taxpayers' time and effort and efficiency, so we're not in here having somebody take 5, 6, 7 minutes. The mayor gets frustrated, people get worked up. I believe it to be something that was heavily supported by the full council. And when you look at what I've witnessed in the last 6 or 7 or 8 months since I've been around, I think it would be a worthy piece of technology to help these meetings become more efficient, more orderly, and I can't figure out why we don't have it installed yet. Thank you.
Normally, we don't do. Yeah, thank you. Please.
I just wanted to address that last comment, and then I'll go into what I was going to say. You know, the timer may be fine, well and good if we were filled. But when we think about the business at hand, the efficiency that is required is based on not only what you do, but the opinions that the people you represent have to put forward. If we had a room full of people, I would understand that. But being there's only 3 people here, I would have to ask, you know, for some sound reasoning, something that is understandable to the people that are trying to get a point across to you. That's one. Number 2, since we're talking about efficiency, the one thing that I would like to say is that I think that we need more talk. Port Orchard has changed so significantly. You know, I grew up around this area. My father came back before he died and said, hey, stay here. This is good. Don't come back to the East Coast, which is where my family originally came from. They came here. But he told me that because there was opportunity here to build a life with people that we liked and that we could interact with and that we could help build the government for a better life for my children. At this point in time, I'm starting to doubt it. I haven't given up. But if you lose sight of what the people want and what they're trying to tell you, just for the sake of moving the meeting along, then you get the wrong idea. And I tell you that from experience. The other thing is that to be a good guardian, to keep the public faith, right, you have to look at the areas that you're deficient in, not the areas that you're trying to promote as a deficiency. And that's one of them. That's all I got to say.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Please.
I wasn't going to speak, but one of the things that I've noticed is it depends on who you are on how the timing goes. You get a developer in here or somebody in the business world, and that little 3 minutes goes by quickly and nobody up there says, okay, let's stop the talk. But if it's just a normal citizen, the 3 minutes becomes much more important, and that's a discrepancy I see frequently. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Well, we're just about through with our meeting, but we do have an executive session, and we will go into the executive session and be in there 10 minutes, and this will be about real estate pursuant to RCW 4230-110, 1 and B. And we don't anticipate any action to be taken other than coming back at the